This lesson is going to look at functions, the whole package. Remember, our ways to represent a function are by writing an equation, an input-output table, a graph, or a verbal explanation. So let's take a look at a word problem that involves a function. It says Aiden is saving up his money to buy a set of classic comic books. He started with $50 he got for his birthday, and he is now putting away $20 a week that he receives for doing his chores. So in the beginning, at week 0, Aiden had $50. At week number 1, he had the $50 that he had from his birthday, and he increased that by $20. So he would have $70 after week 1. In week 2, he had $20 more, which would be $90. In week 3, he had $20 more, which would be $110. In week 4, he had another $20 more, which would be $130. And then the last week, he had $20 more, so that would be $150. So we need to be able to represent this by a graph. So our x, or our input values, are on my x-axis. That is my week. So our first number is 0. Then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I don't need to go anymore because I'm only going to the 5th week. On my y-axis, I'm going to have my money, or the amount saved. It's a bad dollar sign. So I'm going to have my money or my amount saved. And the smallest number I need is 50, and I need to be able to go to 150. So I can probably number my y-axis by 10. So that first line would be 10. The second would be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, 130, 140, and 150. I can stop there because that's the highest amount that we need. So then I can put my points on the grid. So at 0, he was at $50. At 1 week, he was at 70. At 2 weeks, he was at 90. At 3 weeks, he was at 110. At 4 weeks, he was at 130. And at 5 weeks, he was at 150. So that would be my graph of our function. Now, remember, you can do the next couple of things, ask you to find the rate of change, or the slope, and the initial value, or the y-intercept. Remember, when you're doing this, you can do them one or two ways. You can use the grid, or you can use the slope formula for the rate of change. So if we use the grid, we can use it by drawing our right triangle. So if I take 2 points, let's just say the first two, if I'm going to make my right triangle, I'm going to draw my line going down from the highest one until I can connect it horizontally there. And remember, slope is rise over run. So the slope, I rose 1, 2 lines. However, each line is not 1. We counted the y-axis by 10. So we didn't rise 2, we rose 20. And then we ran 1. So it's 20 over 1, or just 20. And then we also are going to have to be identifying our initial value. Our initial value is where our graph crosses the y-axis, and that would be that point right there that I just circled in green, which would be the value of 50. So let's take a look at what these numbers actually mean. So in order to calculate the rate of change, we could also calculate the rate of change, or the slope, using the formula. Remember, the formula is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I have my points 0, 50, and 170, just like I did with the triangle, and I have them labeled x1, y1, x2, y2. I can then go ahead and substitute. So I would have m being equal to 70 minus 50 over 1 minus 0, which would give me 70 minus 50 is 20, and 1 minus 0 is 1, which would still equal 20. So what does it represent? Remember, it's the change in y over the change in X. So our y-axis, if you recall from the graph, is money. So the 20 would be money, and then the 1 would be the x-axis, which is the weeks. So it means that is increasing his amount by $20 every 1 week. The initial value. The initial value is the point where it crosses the y-axis, or the y-intercept. That point was 0.50. Or you could just tell me that it was 50. What does it represent? Well, remember that the first value in order to pair is the x, the second is a y. So what does a 0 represent? It represents in 0 weeks, because weeks is x, Aiden had $50, because 50 is the y and the y is the money. Then we want to write an equation. Remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where slope is the m and b is the y-intercept. In order to write our equation, we can take those two values that we just found and substitute them in our equation. So our equation should be y equals the slope, which we call was 20x, plus the initial value. And the initial value that we just came up with was 50. So our equation for this particular function is y equals 20x plus 50. We also want to look at, is this function directly proportional? The answer to this should be no, because while even though when you graph it, it is linear, it does not go through the origin. It does not pass through 0, 0. Then the last thing is to describe the function verbally. You're just restating what the information was being told to you in the question. So you could tell me that Aiden began with $50 and he increased the amount by $20 each week.